Brazil, which is the driving engine in Latin America, is doing very badly, and this has an effect on the other countries. But Argentina has changed government and has a government which is very market-driven, so this brings a lot of hope. So it's very optimistic, the outlook.
Well, I think that is the new government in Argentina is putting a lot of good momentum in the entire region. In Chile and in Colombia, we are experiencing a very positive momentum. Mexico probably is also in a turmoil situation similar to Brazil. Not that serious, but the same. And I would say that in general, the economy in the region is growing in general, with the exception of Brazil. And I would say that there is a very good business momentum in general across the region. Probably Chile is one of the driving engines now in terms of regional investment. There are many retail companies from Chile opening operations in Colombia, in Mexico, in Brazil, in Argentina. I would say that from the Chile standpoint, we see a lot of activity in the retail sector, in the financial industry, across the board, in all the sub-segments, let's say in banking, insurance, asset management. The pension fund industry is growing a lot too. The mining, which has been historically a very important piece of business in Chile, has fallen dramatically. I don't know the other countries, another...
in Argentina, it's a little bit different. All what is related with consumer, which is consumer goods and retail, is in a bad moment because there is an adjustment to bring the inflation down, and that the only way is to reduce consumption. But there is a lot of investment in infrastructure and energy. So in Argentina, we are working a lot in mining and in alternative energies like wind energy or solar sun panels too. So it's like the opposite of what he just described. The other big sector in Argentina is agriculture, but that has not a very high impact on executive search. And financial services, where the banks are always doing well, but they still are not big consumers of searches because they build their own teams from inside.
If you see the landscape in Latin America, practically all the major global financial executive search firms are working, all the most important one. And I would say that what probably the main difference is that it's a less mature market than in Europe or in the United States. The industry started in these countries 70 years ago, and really has started in Latin America in the last 30 years, 25 years, 20 years. So it is an immature business from the demand standpoint. I would say that if I take, for instance, in Chile, the 500 largest companies, probably the top 30% or 35% do executive recruitment through headhunting firms. And the rest, they do it themselves, okay? Through the contacts and the typical, very provincial way of sourcing people. So, but I don't see major difference, in terms of practices, policies, procedures, the operating model for search as the processor. In my opinion, they are very similar. When I lived many years in Mexico, in New York, in Brazil also, and I remember that I did headhunting. I hired headhunting firms, and I remember that the process was the same in all the different countries. So this is my view.
I prepared a paper very recently for one of these clients which Mario describes, where I try to put myself in the shoes of somebody who looks and receives proposal and they all look the same, and how to read between lines and what are the real factors that allow him to make a good decision. So basically what I try to show is what drives the success of a process, which is not the name and not the methodology, it's more the experience and the depth of the analysis and of the research.
I think that this immaturity level of the market all constitute a tremendous advantage, I would say, for firms like the firms that are partners, members of AltoPartners in Latin America, that are very formal and structured, firms. So it's a good opportunity because you can create much more value to the clients in this process than just coming with 3 names at the end of the process, or show me 3 candidates or 4 candidates. This is all the process of searching and recruiting management. If it is well done, it really constitutes like a very good experience with the client. It's a client experience very solid because you do hunting, you coach, you mentor, you create a space of intimacy with the client that the typical firms or unprofessional or less professional firms cannot do very well.
Find either the firms or the people they can trust, and then delegate and trust, because the culture is different and the environment is different, and sometimes when they don't trust, they ask for things that are less relevant to the success of the function than what we know. So that's also an educational process. We have to educate maybe local companies, but we have to educate also multinational companies. And due to our maturity and experience, we actually do that. So we put ourselves in the role of shareholder. If I want to run this business, what do I need? So I don't listen to the orders or the spec of the client, but I try to figure it out for myself and then to transmit it to the client. And if he trusts me, he will be doing the right thing.
Yeah. I have the impression, sorry, you mentioned that the markets are quite different. I think that, for instance, in regions like Europe, even in South Asia, I have the impression that you have more similarities in the way of doing the things. No, in Latin America, the quality of the talent pool is different country by country. The culture, it is is quite different. There's some countries that are where the institutions work better than in others. In some countries, a country manager, a general manager, has to deploy a tremendous amount of time in interacting with authorities, for instance, doing kind of lobbying and things like that. In other countries, in the same position, you don't need to do that much, So this is also something that condition the jobs and the way of operating country by country. And I think that this is something critical for the multinationals.
What I can add is that some experiences I have had is that, let's say, an Anglo-Saxon company designates a regional VP who is Spanish-speaking because he comes from some Spanish-speaking country. And they think that because he speaks Spanish, he will understand the culture. But there are big cultural differences within Latin America. So Latin America North not necessarily understands Latin America South. Let's say a person from Mexico, from Puerto Rico, might understand or might not understand the culture. So it's not a matter only of language, it's deeper than that. In countries like ours, first, the person has to be much more political than technical. So the companies do not develop technical management tools, but they have to insert themselves in the business community. So a general manager of a company in Argentina probably has to be able to speak to the president or to Congress members and in chambers. Also, if you look at the variation of GDP in Argentina, at least in the last years, it's a terrible zigzag, so you have ups and downs. And I would say the main qualification required is to be able to adapt to those. So a plan which you developed in October 2017 to be executed in 18 probably is invalid in February 18, so you will have to do it again and again. And The other characteristic is to be able to describe all this in a sincere way to the shareholders and create a confidence in the ability of this person to manage with independence.
10 years ago, I was expatriate 15 years ago, 20 years ago, during almost 20 years of my life. And I remember in different countries there was tremendous amount of, I was in Citibank in banking, and in every country easily you would have 15, 20, 30 expatriates. Today, this is not the case, and for several reasons. One, because this was a very expensive solution, and second, because the quality of the talent management, of the management pool, has improved substantially, in Latin America. When we do searches in Chile, for instance, we always consider candidates from Argentina, from Spain, from Colombia, from Mexico. So there is a stock of talent of much better quality today than 10 years ago. This is my view. I don't know.
I agree. The answer is people do much better if they are local. And then you have some differences, like Argentines tend to be very good in different cultures, maybe because they are so used to ups and downs and to analyze that they take nothing for granted. So it is very normal that an Argentine general manager then has a regional position. And normally they tend to be successful, so they don't need to bring from other places. On the other hand, people from Brazil, which is a very large country, have some difficulties in adapting to smaller countries like Peru or Chile or Argentina. So again, you have to find the right fit for the situation.